I lived there until I was 7. My mother split up from my dad and married my stepdad. We moved to California. We lived in San Francisco from age 7 to 11. Then I lived in Florida. He was going to the University of Florida at Gainesville. Lived there from age 11 to right around 13. Then we moved to Boston, and I lived in Boston for the next 10 years. And that's really where I grew up. I grew up basically, when I think of where I come from, I think of Boston. It's also the place where I started doing stand-up comedy, which means a lot to me. And it's also where I started fighting. It's where I started doing martial arts. But all the significant things that happened in my life happened in Boston in my developmental period.
And so you moved to Boston when you were how old?
13.
13, I see.
Yeah.
Right. And then you were there for how many years?
11 years.
Oh, yeah, so that's a long time.
Yeah.
Where do you live in Boston?
Newton, Upper Falls. It's a suburb of Boston.
Yeah. Nice in New England, eh?
Yeah, I love it out there.
Yeah, me too.
The people have a great sense of humor. It's like Toronto in a way that you have to deal with that wicked winter. And I think that develops character in people.
It was funny. When I moved to Boston, because I'd lived in Alberta and then Montreal. And Montreal is bloody horrible in the winter, and Alberta's even worse. And so I'd go down to Boston, and I went down there to interview first, and it was February, and it was spring as far as I was concerned. I didn't even have a coat on. And then when we lived there for years, it was so funny. We lived in this old house by a park, and we'd get those nor'easters blow in, with the hurricane level winds, and it bloody well snowed 3.5 feet. And I'd be thinking in my Canadian way that, Jesus, I better not go outside because I'll just freeze to death the second I step outside. But I'd go outside and it was like, it was 34 degrees or some damn thing. It's like I was expecting minus 40, just horrible. So my Boston winters never, apart from the snow, which was, deadly significant, they never really struck me as winter. They sort of struck me as, this is the sort of winter that you'd like to have if you wanted a showy winter that people could be pleased with rather than one that just sort of killed you.
Yeah, Canadians are on another level when it comes to winter. I have some pretty good friends that live in Alberta. And whenever I go up there, it's like, whoa.
Yeah. Where do you go? Where do you go?
They're outside of Edmonton. They're about 2.5 hours north of Edmonton.
Where?
I don't know the name of their town. It's where I go bear hunting.
Because bear, one thing you notice about bear is they have fur. See, that's why they can live there. Human beings, they don't have fur. So they actually can't live there. Yeah, 2.5 hours north of Edmonton in the winter. Yeah. You go outside.
Rugged.
You go outside in the wrong day and you're out there too long, then you die. So
or you run into a grizzly, which is also
yes. There's also that. Those are nothing to contend. Those are nothing to take lightly, man. When we used to go camping, especially in British Columbia, grizzly bears were always a concern because, like a black bear, if it chases you, and first of all, it's only about a third the size of a grizzly bear, and it's still pretty big. Like it's a black bear, it's not like a house cat. And if those things chase you and you play dead, they'll usually leave you alone. But if grizzly chases you and you play dead, then it eats you. And then of course, if you fight back, it also eats you. It just maybe you get a blow or two in, and probably not. So. Yeah, that was one of the terrors of camping there.
More people are preyed upon by black bears. When a black bear attacks you, it's usually because it's trying to eat you. When a grizzly bear attacks people, it's usually either a mistake or it was scared or it's really hungry.
Yeah, the black bears tend to be like that too. A lot of them are old if they attack you.
Yeah.
They're getting so they can't catch a real animal, so they'll settle for like an Arctic monkey with no fat. So
yeah, they get desperate.
Yeah. So New Jersey. What do you remember about New Jersey?
Boy, that's where I went to Catholic school, which was a horror in and of itself. And it's where my relatives lived, and I just remember the ethnic Italian environment and what that was like. What it was like being around my relatives out there. Very Sopranos-like, if you ever watched the TV show.
Oh, yeah.
That's really representative of a lot of New Jersey. I don't remember too much other than that, though. I was pretty little when we left.
Do you still have relatives out there?
I have one uncle. Well, two uncles that still live there.
You ever see them?
I haven't seen them in years.
Okay, so New Jersey, mostly positive memories, do you think? Or it's just, 7 and below, that's pretty young, so.
Well, it was a tumultuous time period for me. My parents were always fighting, and it wasn't a good time. So when we escaped New Jersey, it was a relief.
And that was also when your mom split up from your dad?
Yeah.
And are you in contact with your dad?
No, I haven't spoken to him since I was 7 years old.
Is he still alive?
He's still alive, and his name's Joe Rogan, which is even crazier.
Huh. So you ever think about him?
No, not really.
No, it's a long time ago. Well, Well, and do you remember what he was like to you?
He was nice to me. He just wasn't very nice to my mother. They had a very bad relationship.
Right. Okay, so you leave New Jersey and you go to California.
Yeah.
Where do you live there?
We lived in San Francisco, and that was an interesting time for me because it was during the Vietnam War, and it was sort of the height of the hippie movement.
Right.
And my stepdad was a hippie. My father was a police officer in New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
So I went from being around a cop who was a pretty brutal guy to being around a long-haired hippie who was all about peace and love, and he was an architecture student. It was a completely different sort of vibe.
Yeah, sounds like a completely different sort of vibe.
Yeah. I was around a lot of gay folks.
Yeah.
I was around a lot of hippies, a lot of pot smokers, a lot of real open-minded thinkers and weirdos around Haight-Ashbury and that sort of area. We lived near Lombard Street. It was real classic San Francisco in the 70s.
70. So, yeah. Let's see. So you would have been, you said 7. So when were you? I
guess it was like 74.
74.
Probably 74 because I was 7 years old.
Right.
I was born in 67.
So you're 5 years. I see. You're 5 years younger than me. So that places you there. So yeah, it was still pretty hippie central. Yeah,
it was pretty interesting. And then I went from there to Florida, which was like a total polar opposite. That was the first time I'd ever heard anybody say the N-word was in Florida, and I didn't know what it meant. I had to ask my mother. My mother got upset at me. She thought I knew what it meant. I was just playing games. I was like, I don't know what it means. I'm like, tell me what it means. She said it's a bad word for black people. And I was like, wow, really? Okay. Because I was hearing it all the time. I never heard it in San Francisco. I literally didn't hear it until I was 13 years old. Or, 11 years old.
And so where did you move to in Florida?
We moved to Gainesville, which is where the University of Florida was, where my stepdad was going to get he's studying architecture. And then we eventually moved to Boston so he could go to the Boston Architectural Center. That's why we wound up moving there.
And is your mom and your stepdad still together?
Yep, still together.
And do you see them?
All the time. Yeah, they have a great relationship. It's really completely different. They've been together forever. They get along fantastic. And in many ways, that sort of modeled my expectations for a real relationship. Like I saw the worst, and then I saw a really great one. And I'm like, okay, I want that,
Yeah, that's a good choice. That shows some wisdom on your part, picking the second one rather than the first one, let's say.
Yeah.
And has that worked out? Have you had good relationships?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my wife's awesome.
You've been married for how long?
Almost 10 years.
10 years. And you have 2 girls or 3?
I have 3 girls.
3 girls, right, yeah.
2 young ones and 1 adult one.
Right, I remember on the special that I was referring to that you were bemoaning the fact that you were absolutely saturated in a feminine environment.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's interesting, but I think it balances me out. I think ultimately it's probably good for me.
Yeah, you think it's interesting now. You wait till they hit teenagehood. Yeah, then it'll be interesting, all right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed having teenagers, weirdly enough. I mean, we had a good rule in our house with our kids brought their friends over to our house a lot. And it was funny because when they first came over, when my teenagers' friends came over, they were always afraid of me. But after about a month of being there, like getting to know the place a bit, not staying there all the time, obviously, but getting a bit familiar with it, they ended up being a lot more afraid of my wife. So that was quite funny. But she's, she doesn't look that dangerous on first impressions. And she's kind of soft-spoken, but she's very unforgiving. That might be one way of putting it. And then we had a pretty good rule in our house with the teenage kids, it's a good one to know, which was, look, we're really happy you're here, but if you do something really stupid and we never ever have to see you again, that would actually be okay with us.
That's a good rule.
It's a good rule.
Very good
well, they also knew we meant it. And so the kids could have their friends over, and they could have a reasonable amount of fun, or maybe even a slightly unreasonable amount of fun, but they couldn't have an overwhelmingly unreasonable amount of fun. And so,
that's a great way to put it. Overwhelmingly unreasonable amount of fun is a great way to put it.
Yeah, that was too much. We had a good drug policy too, I think. Which was,
how'd that go?
I think it went well. The rule was, look, I know perfectly well you're going to experiment. They were going to an art school. It's like, I think that one of the majors was like pot smoking, and another was experimentation. Like there was just no way they weren't going to experiment. And my rule was, I better not be able to tell because you're being too much of a fool. So if you're going to experiment, you better handle it because otherwise you're pathetic. And that seemed to be pretty good. Well, that's, because I really thought it through, because there's a literature on experimentation among adolescents, both criminal experimentation, delinquency, minor delinquency and that sort of thing, and drug use. And you get pathology at both ends. The ones who are, smoking pot every day and taking drugs on a regular basis, their outcome's not so good. But the ones who abstain completely and never experiment, their outcome is also not so good. They tend to be on the dependent, anxious end of the distribution. And so, you want your kids to, play with the rules a little bit. But then I thought, you got to play with the rules a little bit. What are the rules about playing with the rules? And one should be, try not to be a bigger fool than necessary. That's a good one. So you're not compromising yourself in the present. But the biggest issue, I think, really, and I think this is the fundamental rule for experimentation with adolescence, is you don't get to screw up your future. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's the killer.
Well, what I worry about more than anything is opioids. I worry about those because people are dying from them.
Yeah.
No one's dying from pot. It's very rare that anybody is doing something so stupid that they put their life in danger from pot or mushrooms. I'm worried about the ones that kill you. I worry about pills more than anything that my children might possibly face, especially when I consider the fact that these opioid manufacturers, they keep making these damn things stronger. And I don't understand. It's not like OxyContin wasn't strong enough as it is, but now they have fentanyl. And now they're coming up with things that are stronger than fentanyl. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's a weird arms race, because, this is something that's really an unexpected consequence of the illegalization of drugs, is that now we've generated all these chemists who are really good at making tiny variations on every psychoactive substance known. And now instead of like 10 addictive substances you can get yourself into serious trouble with, there's 300.
Yeah.
So that doesn't seem to be a big plus.
No, it doesn't. It's disturbing and it's disgusting. And, they're finally starting to bring some of these guys to justice, and they're arresting some of these people and bringing them to court. Some of these manufacturers, they've been pushing this stuff down people's throats for years and incentivizing doctors to subscribe them. And it's
a tough one, man. Like when my daughter was sick, when she was a kid, she was in extreme, it's got to be agony is the right word, for like 2 years about that, because she was walking around on 2 broken legs. You know her story a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the physician at Sick Kids, which was the person who was dealing with her arthritis, would only prescribe her basically, Anacin, minor league over-the-counter painkillers, which was like trying to kill a grizzly bear with a fly swatter. It really wasn't the right tool for the job. And we found a family doctor who had enough courage to prescribe her OxyContin. And that was no joke, because for the first couple of weeks she was on OxyContin. It was really odd and rough because it was like she was drunk. And so that was, that was weird socially, to say the least, and also rather frightening, but it did control her pain. And we actually had them mix OxyContin with Ritalin, which is a strange combination, but a good one to know about because OxyContin sedates and Ritalin stimulates, but the combination of the two are synergistic, so they can really control pain. And so her pain was controlled enough so that it didn't drive her insane over about a 2-year period. And then once she got her operations and had her legs fixed, she went off the opiates and she went through the whole withdrawal shtick. She had like night sweats and she had ants crawling under her skin, and like it was pretty brutal. Although she stopped cold turkey and never tried them again. She hated them. She said they just made her feel dead. And it's funny, a lot of people, you hear the horror stories that, if you try opiates once, you're pretty much screwed because they're so wonderful. But lots of people don't like them. But there is a sizable minority of people, who really like them. And then there is the danger that you described of overdose. And that's a frightening thing. Hopefully your kids are smart enough to stay mostly away from pills.
Yeah, hopefully. You got to worry about the influence of their friends and peer pressure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the terrible thing about teenagers, is that everybody always says, well, why do you succumb to peer pressure when you're a teenager? And the answer is, well, that's why you're a teenager. You're getting away from your family, and you're even getting away from your like elementary school best friend, and you're starting to join the broader social group. And your job is to fit in, like not to fit in so much that there's nothing left of you, but your job is to fit in to the tribe, to the group, and to learn how to do that. And of course, the downside is, well, you're susceptible to peer pressure, but it's hard to distinguish that from actually being properly socialized. The two things are very tightly aligned. All right, so you were in Florida, and you learned some words that you didn't know. And what was Florida like for you? You were there only for a couple of years.
Yeah, Florida is a strange place. I mean, I still have a love-hate relationship with Florida. It's the land of the lost. It's where people go to escape wherever they're from. Billy Corgan, who's a documentary director. He directed Cocaine Cowboys and a bunch of other great documentaries. He lives down in Florida, and every time he and I talk, we just talk about how ridiculous Florida is. And it's this place where people go to escape. They go to escape from the brutal cold of the Northeast winter, or they go, oh, Jesus, my phone is telling me that I'm running out of batteries. I'm going to have to switch headsets and plug this in, but it only took a second. Yeah. That should be fine. But I just think that Florida is just like a uniquely stupid place.
Well, it's a weird place. It's one of the things that's really struck me about the United States that's really different than Canada, for what that's worth. It's not like Americans really care why the United States is different than Canada, apart from the fact that it isn't like freezing cold 6 months of the year. There's a lot of the U.S. It's like a movie set. So much of it is like it's manufactured to look like something else. And Florida is really like that. Yeah. And it's a very strange place to visit, because everything is not in the old towns, but the beach towns are like that a lot. That there's some genuine old Florida, but most of it's manufactured fake utopia for exactly the sort of people that you're describing. That doesn't make it unbearable or anything. I mean, the weather's nice and the beach is nice, and there's worse places to live, but there's something about it that's like it's got this, well, obviously it's like a resort, but resorts have that sort of fake utopian element to them that is, I don't know what it's like exactly. It's kind of like a child fantasy or an adolescent fantasy, something like that. You know, it's what you think
Yeah.
you want. If you don't think
Yeah,
about it very hard.
I always say that if you want to starve to death, open up a bookstore in Miami.
Aha. Right. Right.
Like legitimately. There's no reading going on down there. It's just a strange place where people go to party, and it's weird.
Right. Now I have to warn you that there is a beam of light shooting directly out of your head.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Right.
And
I'll move this around.
There we go. Yeah, that's probably better because, you know,
I had to plug in because the power was dying on my phone. I guess this video stuff sucks a lot of power out of your phone.
I guess so. I mean, I didn't mind the whole beam of light thing shooting out of your head, but you never know. You don't want to get any rumors started on the internet. And you know how easy that is.
Well, yeah, you amongst all people know how easy that is.
Hey, I haven't been in a scandal for a whole week.
Well, this podcast is still young.